Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. We've got a fantastic episode. We're, of course, going to be talking about Luciferian worship. We're going to be talking about the culture war reaching a global scale. Can we even have a global culture anymore? The more they push for globalism, the less likely it seems to be achieved when there is so much obvious division. Once the Olympics would have been a happy distraction, now it is a battleground for the culture war, with people being unable to agree as to whether or not formerly male athletes that have transitioned ought be able to compete, whether or not Christianity and its sacred artifacts ought be ridiculed. We'll also be talking about the emergence of new nationalist movements and the fact that they are now not derided in the way they once were, perhaps because of the incredible overreach of globalism. And who better to discuss all this with than your favourite Celtic lilting poet, commentator and creator of glorious content, Neil Oliver. Neil, thanks so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Russell. Happy to be with you always.
Neil, we'll do the first 10 minutes of our conversation available widely, but then we'll be exclusively streaming on Rumble simply because the condition of your hair will be eventually subject to a ban. You cannot be your age and have hair that silky on an Alphabet or Meta platform. They won't allow it. They'll censor it. They will prohibit it. You're looking very well today.
That's why I grew the beard, to cover the chin strap that holds on the wig.
You look remarkable. I know you've posted a lot about the Olympic opening ceremony. And I suppose, in a sense, there are few people remaining that would say, oh, it was appropriate, what's the big deal? In the name of inclusivity and diversity, it's helpful and acceptable to celebrate diverse forms of identity and ethnicity by deriding potent Christian imagery. Like, diversity and inclusivity don't need to be earned at the cost of sacred traditional values, I suppose, would be a good place to start. And what's your perspective on it, mate?
Oh, it's so difficult to read what was or wasn't intended by any and all of it. I think what amazes me is that we all know that something like the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games, which is a global spectacle, must have been reviewed and contemplated at length before it happened. I mean, if you anything, be it a story before it goes in a newspaper, or a feature before it turns up in a magazine, or something is broadcast, people analyse it endlessly and painfully to see, how such and such a thing might be interpreted. So it just seemed completely disingenuous the way the opening ceremony happened, and then within what you might describe almost as a matter of minutes, the French regime was kind of apologising for and withdrawing aspects of it, and footage was being deleted from the internet, as though nobody meant any harm here. But I fail to see how you could have had a look at what was planned and not predicted that in the traditionally Christian West, some of the imagery wasn't possibly going to cause offence. It just seemed utterly disingenuous.
Okay, so what we will do is, first of all, we will have some people dress up as Jesus Christ. We will have a little child. We'll have some drag queens. And then we reveal a blue cadaverous figure to be eaten. Good. This is good so far. Yes, check. Let's just have a look at a few of the moments. And yeah, it's difficult to imagine, Neil, that when at the planning stages, at the stages where it was being sort of plotted out just in terms of images and choreography, that it didn't cause some French eyebrows to be raised. Let's have a look at a few moments together.
Performing the song King, costumes, none other than Louis Vuitton.
We could continue to play that with our audio if you can facilitate that in the gallery while Neil and I continue talking. Go ahead, Neil.
I don't know what is inclusive about what seems to be a preponderance of trans women, men, bearded men, juxtaposed in sexualized costume and choreography in proximity to kids. I don't know what that's inclusive of. Who that's inclusive of, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen this thing. The Guardian and others have suggested that while it might have a passing resemblance to the tableau that's known to everyone as Leonardo's Last Supper, it was actually the Feast of the Gods by a Dutch artist. And you think, no, you must have looked at what was going to be the final result of that and thought that most people who aren't art critics or art historians are going to jump straight to the conclusion that you're parodying and mocking the Last Supper, which is a central image for Christians. And also, then there was the way in which people were very quick to say, you would never have done this about any Islamic sacredness. You wouldn't have done that, which is to completely overlook the fact that devout Islam absolutely loves Jesus. They would the suggestion that Muslims anywhere would be rubbing their hands together in satisfaction at seeing Jesus mocked is absolute nonsense. There's a whole chapter of the Quran about Miriam, which is to say Mary. There are more references to Jesus in the Quran than there are to Muhammad. So that divisive element about it, where it was immediately there was an opportunity to cast Christianity against Islam, was also, you think, is everything? Do we just stumble, or are we just herded from one flashpoint to the next, where people with not enough time maybe to process things effectively are just invited to be furious about something all the time? It's just exhausting.
I like that phrase. One flashpoint to the next, invited to be furious about something all the time. If I might guide you to my own interpretation of that flashpoint, isn't implicitly the problem embedded in globalism the idea that we have desanctified and desacralized our cultural spaces and replaced it with a new materialistic, rationalistic power. I was speaking to a priest the other day. That's what I do. And he said that the Enlightenment, this is rather brilliant, Neil, you'll like this. The Enlightenment might be regarded as the flooding of the previous light of Christ, who bears the light to the world, with Luciferian light, i.e. the Enlightenment, if it could be, and forgive the reductivism, be calcified into a single mental object, is the idea that mankind is the summit of all hierarchies. And if human beings are the summit and there is no God and there are no principles, that the individual is the apex and the sovereign, then it's okay to meddle with nature. It's okay to alter your own nature. It's okay to denigrate sacred principles. It's okay to be morally relativist. It's all sorts of ideas become permissible when you extract God. And don't you think that the Olympics as a ceremony, which I suppose would have always been pagan by its nature, at least at its point of origin, is now being used as an object to demonstrate that power now has overrun Christendom. There is not only, as you point out, Christendom, but in fact a religious purview, full stop. Materialism has won, rationalism has won, globalism has won. Be who you will, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Aleister Crowley's Luciferian edict, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, is essentially the principle of government now. While they simultaneously become more authoritarian and more controlling, they place at the apex of our systems of principle the fulfillment of your own goals. You want to do this? Do it. You want to look this way? You can do it. So whilst I believe absolutely in individual freedom, it's pretty clear that the culture is pushing some ideals and is repressing, attacking, savaging even another set of ideals.
Yeah, but I hear all that. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I suppose you could say it's like the replacement of the natural light of natural daylight and sunlight with throbbing fluorescent tubes. There's just no comparison between the value to be derived from natural light in every sense and artificial light. And if it's the replacement of the light of religiosity, or not religiosity, spirituality, with materialism, then I can follow the line of that analogy, and it works. But at what point do the people that have a problem with spirituality or God get over it? I mean, you go all the way back to the English Revolution in the 17th century, so that Cromwell felt the need to cut the head off the king. And then there was the appalling things that happened in Ireland, which were direct. Felt the need.
He felt the need. I'm feeling the need for decapitation.
You couldn't just set that guy aside. You couldn't just give him a job with a broom sweeping the streets or something. You actually had to cut his head off. To take it to the nth degree, and then go off to Ireland and do terrible things there. Focusing on people of religion, people of faith, priests and whatever. And then after the French Revolution, they could not. They were instantaneously about installing an actress in Notre Dame in mockery of a sacred place. And all sorts of terrible things again were done to.
Was she an actress, Neil? Was she an actress? What part was she playing?
Quite so. I think she was mocking Sophia or Wisdom or whatever. And then you've got the canonization of Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Christ to his death. That happens after the French Revolution. Same thing happens after the Russian Revolution in 1917. They canonize Judas Iscariot again, and then they get stuck in, and then there's terrible bloodletting. At what point have you made your point that religion or spirituality or belief in God is to be set aside? They've been at it for hundreds of years, literally, and then you come to something that the Olympic Games, which in essence, games. It's all there in the word. It's for fun. It's supposed to be people coming together to compete at the amateur level to see who's fastest, who's strongest, who can jump highest. And all of it happening in front just to give people something to watch. Why do you have to traduce that by bringing in, and let's take time out here to mock God? Why? Does everything have to present an opportunity to have a go at something that means a great deal to more people alive on the face of the earth than not? Most people on earth believe in God of one sort or another.
I like the idea that we're experiencing the end of fun, the end of games, that what actually a culture war, because culture might be an expression of humanity's creativity, love of the divine, the various ways that love of the divine might be expressed through nature, creativity, and through music or worship or reverence of nature, rather. Now we've reached the point where bagatelles and pastimes and festivals of fun and joy and diversion have become so heavily malign and politicised that almost the concept itself is over. How can there be, Neil, would you say, a simultaneous push for globalism, a simultaneous push for diversity, when having such an antagonistic attitude towards the sacred views of, as you say, a significant demographic, the largest demographic, in fact?
Well, there's something paradoxical about it, because you're trying to replace the very essence of something, meaning. You're trying to replace meaning, the transcendent, with an empty void. It's a paradox. How can you? Why seek to replace something? In fact, by some estimates, everything of any meaning with the opposite, with nothing, with an emptiness, which is really, if you take materialism to its conclusion, we're not even convincing materialists, because if we were materialists, we would have respect for matter, we would have respect for the stuff, but we don't. All we do is we just dig up the earth, we dig up Mother Earth, and we transform the matter that we find there into rubbish that we then, after a couple of years, throw into landfills that then leaks toxically back into the flesh and blood of Mother Earth. The whole thing is so devoid of meaning, and I think it's something. There's almost something hopeful about that, because when you take globalism and materialism and all of that to its logical conclusion, you find out that at the end of it all, there's nothing there. And people are instinctively angry because they sense that the natural law all around them, not just in terms of what was what was happening there in the Olympic opening ceremony. But everything that's natural, the natural law, is being subverted. It's being turned upside down, inside out. And people who don't consider themselves to be spiritual or to be moved by the transcendent are feeling an instinctive upset with it, a physiological response to it, because it's unnatural. What's being foisted upon people is the inversion of and the corruption of the literal corruption of everything that means that has meaning for people.
To use a phrase like unnatural, I think, is also a tacit acceptance of the idea of a divine order. I suppose you could posit a natural order, but deviating from subverting or altering a natural order is only an aberration or abomination if there is something undergirding the natural order that is divine. I'm going to let that question hang. And as well, Neil, it sort of seems that the whole endeavour is somewhat demonic, a kind of a bewildering exercise and in attacking meaning itself. It seems that the diversity and inclusivity are beautiful ideas because they are already afforded in principles like kindness and love and non-judgment and salvation and redemption, ideas that are all present in fact in the ideology that is being blithely traduced and attacked. We're going to come off of YouTube now. If you're watching us on YouTube, click the link in the description and join Neil and I on Rumble. I want to talk a little more about the desacralization of our planet. 1 second, Neil. I'll just do this throw, my darling. The desacralization of the planet. We're going to talk a little bit of about the Tommy Robinson and the re-emergence of nationalism, and if there are versions of nationalism that can themselves be inclusive, compassionate, and loving, or are they, as they are continually assessed to be by their nature, malevolent? We're going to talk a little bit about Kamala Harris as well, and a number of other stories. Click the link in the description. See you over there. Please carry on, dear Neil.